Hello and welcome to World Geography. Today we are going to be learning about the 5 themes of geography. Now this is the warm-up that I have up on the projection as they come into the room. And I'll go ahead and read it for you. It says, most of what we learn in geography can be put into one of 5 categories. For each of them, please put your best guess as to what we'll learn about. Movement, region, place, human environment, interaction, and location. So as they're coming in the room, this is up on the projection and they have to start working on it. And with a question like this, I get a lot of blank faces and I see a lot of kids not moving their pencils. And so when the bell rings and I come in the door, then I explain why I asked this question. I tell the kids at the beginning of the year, nothing that I do in this class is to waste your time. Everything has a purpose. I'm never going to give you busy work. I'm never going to waste your time because that's not fair for you and it's lazy for me. So I explain why I'm asking this question. I say, there will be times in this class where I will ask you a question that I know you do not know the answer to. And then they're like, why are you asking me that question? And so I ask them, why do you think I ask you those questions? And I get a lot of blank faces. So I explain that the reason why I'm giving them a question that I know they do not know the answer to is not to be mean and is not to trick them. It is just to get them started to think. I just want them to start thinking. And I want them to make a hypothesis and a guess. What do you think we're going to learn about? And I also explain to them that I'm not going to go through their warm-up sheet and go, nope, that's not right. Nope, that's not right. Because that's not fair. And that's not the point. The point is not to make them lose points. They should be, putting that key in the ignition and starting that car, starting their brain. So then, once I have reassured them that they're not going to get an F on this, then I allow them a couple minutes to make their best guess. And then we go into what the 5 themes of geography are. But first, I start off with etymology. I love this. I love doing this. A lot of our kids at my school do not have very good reading scores. And so they don't have a lot of, they don't have very good vocabulary. So every time that I can, I will bring in strategies, testing strategies, reading strategies, writing strategies, whatever, just to help them out because they need to practice it as much as they can. So we've already talked about this word on like the first day, but we refresh. So I write on the whiteboard. I say geography. And I underline geo and I underline graphy. Then I ask them, what do you think geo means? Geo means something, graphy means something. What does geo mean? In every class, somebody says world or earth. I'm like, awesome. Yes, that's right. What does graphy mean? And then we work on it and we find out that graphy means the study of. I'm like, okay, so if we put those words together, what does geography mean? Like the study of the earth. I'm like, awesome. So same kind of thing when we look at the word biology, because they also take biology at the same time. So I'm like, what does bio mean? Like life. I'm like, what is ology? They're like the study of. So if we put them together, what is biology? It's a study of life. Okay, awesome. So taking that time to have them understand how to break up words and how to know or figure out what a word means, even if you've never seen it before, that is super, super important. Sometimes we're talking about context clues, and sometimes we have a word like this, where it's based in Greek, and we can split it up, or biology, where it's based in Latin, so we can break that up. Now, technically, the full definition of geography is the study of the Earth's physical and human features and the interactions of people, places, and environments. I tell them that they don't need to know that necessarily, but it's more like for their knowledge, for their information. Then I have them write down the 5 themes, and we did a foldable this year. They wrote down movement, regions, place, human environment interaction, also known as HEI, and location. Then I made a stupid cartoon character, just like I've done in the past, just like I will do in the future. Um, my first 2 years of teaching this, we used Mr. Help as an acronym, but I didn't really like that. And then when I was doing some extra research recently, I saw that another teacher had used Mr. Phil online, and I like that much better because Phil is actually a name. Help, I've never heard of as a name. So I explained to the kids, Mr. Phil's name is important because it's an acronym. Each of the letters represent one of the five themes. So the M, movement; the R, region; P, place; H, human, environment, interaction; and location. So each of his letters of his name represents something, which means it's an acronym. So in their movement section of their notes, they put the movement of people, goods, and ideas. You could also put disease. Disease is also something that's moved around the earth and spreads and it kills people, and it's interesting to learn about. Then I asked them, what is goods? What does that mean? Goods. A lot of times they say food. I always say like stuff. So we're talking about movement of stuff. Then I show them examples of each of these. So for instance, I use Ellis Island. Now the reason why I use this is because the majority of my kids are first generation Americans, and all their family is from Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, those areas, like Central America. And so I bring this in to go back about, 100 years now, almost, and tell them the story of Ellis Island real quickly. And I explain how my family came in through Ellis Island. Not all of them, but at least a couple of my major ancestors came through Ellis Island as well. So just, inputting a little bit of history in while we're talking about the five themes. And then I talk about modern day migration. In every class this year, I had a kid use the word migration before I even brought it up, which is fabulous, which means that they are far ahead of the other 2 years that I've taught. So that's a very good thing. And this is an award-winning picture, very powerful, very interesting to look at. Lots of things happening here, and we see this in the news all the day. Every day. Every day recently, we've seen this in the news. Then we also have these types of movements of people. We have cars, planes, trains, and automobiles, right? And then the movement of goods and stuff. For instance, a warehouse. I always say that's movement because things shouldn't stay in a warehouse. It goes to a warehouse and then it leaves the warehouse. And then we also have like cargo ships and cargo trains, things like that. And then we have the movement of ideas. Here's why this is important. When I talked about the maps lesson, I said that the kids think of a map as a piece of paper that they use, but they don't even use it. So they think that they've never used a map. And when I talked about GPS, they thought of it as like Google Maps. But I explained to them that's far more than that. So when we talk about movement, they think of movement as like basically picking up something and going somewhere with it and then dropping it, and then going somewhere else and picking up something else and then moving that. Like we're physically moving stuff or people. But yes, that's true, but it's more than that. So if we look at the movement of ideas, and they love this. So Snapchat is moving ideas. We could be moving a recipe. We could be moving a revolution. We could be moving a major key alert. We could be moving a lot of different things. But the movement of ideas is super important, especially in 2016. It is so easy. It is so easy to move ideas. 100 years ago, you could still do it, but it would be longer and it would take a lot longer. It would be harder to do. So, which of the following would not count as movement? Sharing ideas on the internet, American troops in Afghanistan, Ebola spreading outside of Africa. All of the above are examples of movement. The answer is D. All of those are examples of movement. In every class, there was at least one or two groups that had a problem with that question. Sharing ideas on the internet, again, movement of ideas. American troops in Afghanistan, that's the movement of people and of ideas, you could say. And then C, Ebola spreading. Ebola is a disease, therefore, the spreading of a disease would count as movement as well. Then we have region. Region is my favorite, which is interesting to me. These are areas that share a common characteristic. And there's three types. There's formal, functional, and perceptual. So let's go into each of those. A formal region says an area that can be defined by collecting data. This is official. Here's the example that I always use. I always pick up my binder and I say, okay, let's say that I'm in the Middle East, and let's say for argument's sake that I am a guy, because it just is a lot easier to be a guy in the Middle East. So I'm going door to door. I speak Arabic. I say, hey, what religion are you? And they're going to say Muslim. And I'm like, cool, thank you. And then I mark on my binder, okay, 1. Then I go next door. Hey, what religion are you? And then they say Muslim. I'm like, awesome, thank you. And then I mark again. And then I go next door again. Hey, what religion are you? Oh, Muslim. Cool, thanks. So eventually I have a list that shows that the majority of people in this area are Muslim. Therefore, I can say this is a predominantly Muslim area of the world. Does not mean that everyone there is Muslim, but it means that the majority are. And I can prove it. This is not just me hearing that they're Muslim over there. It's me proving to you that, hey, this is the data that I found. And that data is repeatable. So if you want to try, because you don't believe me, and you go door to door and say, hey, what religion are you? You can find the same information as I did. Now the picture here, it says the Midwest Corn Belt, and it has an area of the United States shaded. This is where the majority of the corn that's grown in America is grown. Does that mean that they only grow corn here? No. It just means that the majority of the crops in this area are corn. I can prove it. Now, functional regions are the topic of argument for the other world geography teachers in my district. Literally, full-grown, 50-year-old men argue about functional regions. I don't know why. I feel like they did not do any research on the internet to see, what is a functional region, because it's not too complicated. A functional region is exactly like it sounds. It has a function. So then I have to ask my kids, what is a function? Because this is not a common word. So function. It does something. It moves. So let's look at an example. A delivery area is an example of a functional region. You have something moving. What is moving? A pizza delivery guy in his car and the pizza. They are delivering that pizza from the pizza area or from the pizza shop to somewhere else. So that is a functional region. Another example would be a highway. Houston is like a very good example of this. In the middle of our map is downtown, and it spreads like a circle around it. Some cities are not like that. If you look at a map of El Paso, for instance, you'll see that El Paso is a long and skinny city. So there is downtown kind of in the middle, but there's no, America ends below El Paso. So that's just Juarez. So you don't have this circular target-like situation happening. In Houston, you have downtown right in the center, and then everything comes off of that. So that whole area, all those highways around Houston, they all work together, making a functional region. A perceptual region. I ask a kid what a perception is. What is a perception? If you see someone and you have a stereotype, or if you perceive something about a person, it's basically you are judging them. Sometimes judgments are right, sometimes judgments are wrong. And something that I do bring up in class is that stereotypes are based in truth. And I know that's like something that makes people uncomfortable, but I use the example of Texas. So my class is in Houston, right? So I have some relatives who live up in New York, and I say, well, if I'm up with my cousin in New York, and if I ask them, what do you think my kids wear to school? My cousin will be like, well, they probably wear like cowboy boots and cowboy hats and big belt buckles and some gingham shirt. And if I ask them like, how do you think they get to school? Well, then maybe my New York cousin would say horses. Yeah, horses. Now I ask my kids, do we ride horses to school? They're like, no, of course not. I'm like, okay. Um, does anyone in the school wear cowboy clothing? And they're like, yeah, a couple people. I'm like, okay, so are there Texan cowboys? Yes, there are people in Texas who are cowboys. So doesn't mean that we're all cowboys, that's for sure. We have like two in the whole school. But if you look at Texas as a whole, yes, we do have people who are cowboys. That's why we have the reputation of being cowboys. Okay, so stereotypes are typically based on truth. It doesn't mean that they're always right. My kids in my school are proof that stereotypes are not always right. So they understand that idea of, oh yeah, Texan is a cowboy. Which is so funny to say Texan, the football team, and cowboy, the football team, but they understand what stereotypes are and perceptual regions based on that analogy alone. And then I show them this map where you get to see how people perceive other areas. So, a formal region is determined by what people think about a place, stereotypes, data, movement, or ideas. A formal region is determined by data. Remember, I can go door to door. Hey, what religion are you? Hey, what religion are you? And then I'll get data to prove that. Which is not a functional region? A pizza delivery area, highway system, the Corn Belt, or airports. The Corn Belt, is not a functional region. Now, a kid could say, well, what are they doing there? What is their function? Well, they're growing corn. That's not the point of a functional region. Um, the Corn Belt is an area in which corn grows, but it's not being moved. That's not why it's called the Corn Belt. It's because it's growing there. A perceptual region is determined by what people think about a place, stereotypes, data, movement, or fact. A perceptual region is determined by what people think about a place or stereotypes. So I ask them things like, in a movie, how do you know a character is from California? And maybe they think, well, they're surfers and they have longish blonde hair and they go skateboarding and they act like Californian. Well, does everyone in California surf? Nope. Do a lot of Californians surf? Yes. So again, you have that stereotype based on truth kind of thing. Place. Physical or human characteristics that make one place different from another. So for example, for Houston, I asked the kids what Houston's nickname is. And they're like, H-Town. And I'm like, yes, I know. But there's two major ones that I'm thinking of. The Bayou City and Space City. We are called the Bayou City because we have bayous that run through the city. Duh. A bayou, because bayous are not that common unless you're in like Louisiana or East Texas. So a bayou is basically like a stream slash river, kind of a swampy area a little bit. So we have lots of those, and they literally run through our city. So that is one of our nicknames based on a physical characteristic. And our other human characteristic nickname is the Space City because we have Johnson Space Center. So, like in Apollo 13, when they're like, Houston, we have a problem, that's because we have the Johnson Space Center. So, some examples of physical characteristics: bayous, mountains, rivers, lakes, weather, climate, soil, plants, animals. Basically, anything that would be here without humans. And then we have human characteristics. Everything, all these stuff we created, basically. Language, religion, government, economics, food, transportation, settlement patterns, beliefs. Food meaning not necessarily, it could be what we grow, but it's not necessarily a physical characteristic food. But play sucks. In my opinion, I don't think it should be a 5 theme. I understand like why, but at the same time, it seems like the definition is so close to region that I don't really like place, and I think region is funner. So I just think it kind of sucks. Physical and human characteristics define a place. True or false? This is true. Then we get to HEI, human environment interaction. This is one of the easiest ones because it is exactly as it sounds. This is how humans interact with the environment. Now, these can be positive, negative, or neutral. Sometimes they're both. Sometimes they're neither. Let's give some examples. Now, I put the things that I put in positives, they can also be negatives. Depends on how you look at it. A dam could be a positive thing because you are preventing flooding, which means that you could save lives. But it could be negative because fish can't get downstream, or soil that replenishes old soil, then that would be stuck behind the dam, so that would not be good. Positives, wind turbine, but again, if we're talking about how they kill birds, well, that would not be a positive. Farming, depending on how you do it. Are you slashing and burning to create farmland? That would be negative. But are you doing it responsibly? Well, that's fine. But the negatives, they're never going to be positive. There's nothing positive about an oil spill. There's nothing positive about cutting down too many trees. Nothing positive about farming too much. But neutral, houses on stilts, there's nothing positive or negative about that. It just is. So again, I like to make my kids embarrassed for me. As long as they're paying attention, that's all I care about. So we have Mr. Phil again: movement, region, place, human environment, interaction, and location. And here are the 3 main ways that we interact with the environment. We modify it to make it do what we want. We adapt to it, and we depend on it. Now, modify and adapt get confused very often. And depend confuses people too, but separately. So I'll clear those up as we get to them. To modify the environment means to change it permanently. It's like a scar on the environment. It has changed it forever. For instance, a dam. All right. Now, adapt. Adapt is something that we do to deal with the environment. We're not changing the environment. We are dealing with it. So, the example that I use is I tell the kids, hey guys, it's your 16th birthday, and out of nowhere, your parents buy you a new car. They buy you a car, and it's from 1991. So, how did people back then listen to music? Well, they listened to cassettes. Now, here's the deal. You don't have any cassettes, and all of your music is on your phone. So, how can you play your music on your phone in your car? Some kids don't know. One kid knows. He says, you can get one of those cassettes that has the wire hanging out of it. I'm like, hey, yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about. So you can plug, so they have a cassette, and on one side it has a wire that hangs out of it, and that wire you can plug into your phone. or iPod or whatever. So you plug that into your car stereo, the cassette area, and then you can play your music through the speakers of your car. Now, am I able to take that cassette out? Yes. Have I changed my car? No. What is another option that I have for how I can play music in my car? They're like, well, you can get a new stereo. Yes. So if I have some extra money lying around, then I can either figure out how to do it myself or I can pay someone to take out the old stereo with the cassette player and I can put in a new one. Let's say this has Bluetooth and Sirius XM and whatever else I want. Have I changed my car? Yes. Can I play a cassette anymore? No. I have modified my car. I also use for modification the examples of body modifications. I talk about gauges and plugs in people's ear and how it stretches the earlobe. That cannot grow back. If I have a split tongue, some people cut their tongue in the middle to make it like a snake. That does not go back. You can try, but it's not truly going to be like normal. That is a modification. Also, for adapt, I talk about a chameleon. If a chameleon is in a patch of grass, what color is it going to be? Green. But if he scurries over to some dirt, what color is it going to be? Brown. Has the chameleon changed the dirt to make it brown? No. Has the chameleon changed the grass to make it green? No. The chameleon has changed itself. The chameleon has adapted to its environment. So, for examples of adapt, if you're building a house on stilts, Houston is right by Galveston, Texas. Galveston has a lot of buildings on stilts, and the majority of my kids have been to Galveston. So I asked them, hey, have you guys been to Galveston? They're like, yep. So I ask, hey, have you seen these buildings that are on stilts? Do you know why they're on stilts? It's because they know it's going to flood. So if I know that it's going to flood, but I still want to build my house there, I can't say, hey, nature, please stop flooding. All I can do is say, well, if it's going to flood, then I'm going to make sure that my house is up high so it doesn't get flooded. That is an adaptation. I'm not changing the environment. However, on Galveston, there's also a modification. 100 years ago, in 1900, it's almost 116 years ago to the day. It was like September 8, I think, 1900. There was a hurricane that came in and wiped out Galveston. And because of this, they made the seawall. If you ever go to Galveston, Texas, and you go down to the beach, you will have to climb down some steps. And that's because they built a wall, like a literal wall, to keep the ocean out, just in case. So when it gets pretty high, it can still get over that wall, but it's just the first defense. So that is a modification. If humans disappeared tomorrow, that wall would still be there for hundreds of years, probably. So that's a scar on the earth. It's changed it. Doesn't mean that a scar is a bad thing. Most people have a scar. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing, but it's not going to go away. That's a modification, is like a scar. It's when you've changed your stereo. And an adaptation is when you bought the adapter with the cassette and the wire hanging out. That is an adaptation. It's building your house on stilts. Then we have depend. Here's why it gets confusing for people. We depend on the environment to survive. We depend on it for food, water, and air. We need those to survive. If we don't have one of those things, we're dead pretty quick. Now, we also depend on the earth for things like oil and gold and salt, other superfluous things that we don't actually need to survive. So what I explain is We depend on the environment for things to survive, and we also include anything that the earth has given to us. The earth has given us gold. The earth has given us oil. The earth has given us salt. We don't need those to survive. But it is something that the earth has given us, and therefore it is dependent. Which of the following is not an example of depend? A house on stilts, drilling for oil, solar panels, what am I saying? Solar panels, or fishing. We do not depend on the earth for a house on stilts. Which of the 5 themes is that? Building a house on stilts. This is adaptation. Adapt. Which of the following is not an example of modify? A dam, farming, creating a tunnel, or cutting steps into the side of a small mountain? Farming is not an example of modify. It could be, but it's the least best example here. A dam is a modification. We have changed the earth to make it do what we wanted it to do, and it will leave a scar. It cannot go back. Creating a tunnel. Let's say I want to get to the other side of a mountain, but I do not want to go over the mountain, and I do not want to go around. I want to go through it. So I'm going to have to blow a hole through that mountain. Does rock grow back? No. So when I blow a hole through that mountain, it's never going to be the same again. I have changed it. I have scarred it. The last one. This is called terraced farming, not terrorist farming. Terraced. Terraced. Terraced farming. These hills used to be like a slope, just like any other hill. Let's just say it's like this. But what they did is they cut out little steps on here. Now, why would they do that? It's so that they can farm. You can farm on here. You can farm on there. You can farm on here. You cannot farm like this. You've never seen a farm that's at an angle. Never. I can't think of one. There's always has to be a flat spot for them to go on. So we'll talk about that again later when we get to Asia and South America. What's most amazing for me about this is that they did this 1,000 years ago. Without any modern tools. They cut into a mountain to farm on it, which is really cool. Which of the following is not an example of adapt? A house on stilts, air conditioning, drilling for oil, or wearing a big coat in Antarctica? Drilling for oil is not an example of adapt. Let me explain. If you have a house on stilts, what you're saying is, I know that it's going to flood. Instead of saying, hey, Earth, please stop flooding, I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to say, well, if it floods, I'm going to put my house on stilts. That way I won't get water in my house. Or I hope I won't. So you're not changing the environment. For air conditioning does not change the climate of the outside. Air conditioning changes the climate of your building or your room. So I am changing myself and my own conditions to deal with the Earth's condition. Drilling for oil. I'm sorry, what did I say the answer was? The answer is C. I don't even remember what I said. Anyway, drilling for oil is not an example of adapt. It is an example of depend. It is an example of depend because that is something that the Earth has given us. The Earth has given us oil. We don't need it to survive, but it is something that the Earth has given us. And wearing a big coat in Antarctica, that is an example of adapt. Again, I'm not changing the environment. I'm not saying, hey, can you please make it warm? Please turn off the heat. It's really, really cold over here. Instead, I'm just putting on a coat. And I'm saying, well, I know it's freaking cold out here, but I'm just going to wear my coat and hope that it's good enough. Finally, Location. There are two types of location. There's absolute and relative. Absolute is exact. There's only one place in the world that has that location. In their notes, I have them put exact and Google Maps. If I can plug it into Google Maps, then it's absolute. There's only one place in the world that has that location. However, you have, oh wait, so here's this. On point, right? Stupid Mr. Phil. Movement, region, place, human environment interaction, and location. So relative location. Location in relation to somewhere else. Now, I have them typically not write down that definition because you may not understand what it says. So I have them write down one of the examples. So I explained to them, absolute location I can put into Google Maps. If I type in the McDonald's next to Long John Silver's into Google Maps, if it could laugh at me, it would laugh at me because it's like, you're so stupid. Why would you plug that into Google Maps? Relative location cannot be plugged into Google Maps. Absolute can. So, an example of a relative location. Venus is the next planet over. If you've hit Mercury, you've gone too far. Okay. So, 40N 74W. Is that absolute or is it relative? This is absolute. There's only one place in the world that has those coordinates. Off of 610 by NRG Stadium. That's some Houston geography for you. But can you plug that into Google Maps? No. So this is relative location. There's a lot of things off of 610. NRG Stadium is where the Texans play, but right next door is the Astrodome. Right next door to that is a convention center, I think, and then there's also a hotel. There's a bunch of different stuff. That's not specific. It could get me where I'm going if I'm looking for the Astrodome, but I could also be getting to a lot of other places from those same directions. 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, Northwest, Washington, D.C., 2500. This is absolute. Can I plug it into Google Maps? Yes. That is why it's absolute. All right. So this is a fun way, I feel, to wrap it up. I love musical theater, and I will include it as much as I possibly can. So I'm going to give you the link to this video. It is a Tony performance from the musical In the Heights. In the Heights is a musical from about 2008, I believe, and it's by Lin-Manuel Miranda. It's the first rap musical that really gained popularity. Lin-Manuel Miranda is the guy who made Hamilton, so now he's really, really crushing it with that. And back in the day, about 8 years ago, he was killing it with In the Heights as well. So in this performance, you're going to see all of the 5 themes of geography. You'll find all of them. So while you are watching it, look and keep in mind what the 5 themes are and see which examples you can find in this performance. All right, so thank you for watching. If there's any comments or recommendations or anything like that, please let me know. And thank you for watching. Appreciate it.